Well, here we are, day 2 of our SketchUp, drawing our nightstand, and wanted to show you how to get back to our drawing. If we're at our home page for Canvas, the easiest route to go is to go right here to where it says SketchUp. We'll click here, and then log into app by clicking here. I hope yesterday or the last time you worked on this was successful. If you've got questions, please reach out and ask. I'm happy to help. As this is loading, a couple things that I've always got up. I've always got the plan for me right here, the at-home COVID woods project, because this is going to give us the sizes, and I'm going to reference back to this when we're looking at different parts of the nightstand. SketchUp is still loading. Now I can see right here, COVID nightstand, step 1 is what I called it. I'm going to open this up, and we are today going to draw our shelves and our back. One of the things that we've got to do, if you didn't do this last time we're together, and I don't think that we did, is we've got to make this thing a component. So we talked about this briefly in class, but if we don't make things a component, when we send them to the CNC router, it sees it as one big project. So if I didn't make this a component and I drew the entire cabinet, I am going to wind up, the CNC router is going to want to have a block of wood that starts out 15 inches thick, 30 inches wide, and it's going to try to cut all the parts out. And that's just not going to work. So in order for our CNC router to recognize parts as unique and individual, we've got to do this thing called make a component. So to do that, I got to double click until everything turns blue. You can see everything is blue on here. And then I right click and I say make a component. And I'm just going to call this a case side and hit OK. Now you see when I click on this even just one time, everything is selected. Now I don't want to go through that whole process that we went through the other day to try to draw the other side. What I want to do is make a copy of the side that we have already. But before I make a copy, I want to lay down some guidelines so I know where that copy is going to go so it's exactly the right length. So my first step here is to take my tape measure tool, and if you recall, in looking at our project here, our project is 15 inches from left to right. So I want to make sure, and I can see that right here on my face frame sketch, I want to make sure then that when I go back to SketchUp, that when I place the side, it's going to be exactly 15 inches away. So to do that, I'm going to start a line here, and I'm just going to drag it. I want to make sure that that line is red. If I go up, it'll probably turn green, if you can't even see it right now. But I want to make sure it's red, so we're going on the red axis. And then I'm going to click to place it and type 15 inches. You can see it in the bottom right corner, and hit enter. So now when I grab this and copy it, I can get it exactly 15 inches over there. But SketchUp likes intersections. So I want to make sure, I'm just going to kind of zoom in until I can get to the midpoint here, and just double click, and it's going to put a guideline there. That way I know that the edge is going to come to this intersection right here, and that the pieces are going to be lined up. So now SketchUp does something fun here. This little crosshair right here, this arrow tool, if I hover over it, I can see it says move. If you don't have the move tool, you may have the rotate tool there in place, or you may have the follow me, I believe, or the scale one there. But we want to have this move tool. And there's a really subtle thing that we can do that involves pushing the control button on your keyboard. So right now, if you look at the crosshairs on my screen, when I type control, it gets a little plus there. That's what we want to have. What that means is that instead of moving an object, it's going to create a duplicate of that object. Now if I hit control again, that plus is gone and it's not going to create it. So again, look at the crosshairs. I want to hit control so I get a plus, and then I want to zoom in here so I'm careful where I grab this. I want to grab this on the outside. I click it once, and you notice it makes a whole nother copy of it, and I'm going to bring that to here. But notice I grabbed the wrong edge because we want it to be 15 inches exactly from here to this line. So now I just need to grab this edge. Now I'm not hitting the plus, because if I hit the plus, if I hit control to add that plus, it's going to make a new one. I just want to move the existing one. So I'm just going to grab that and pull it to the right place. Now my two sides are 15 inches from outside to outside, so that face frame that you built is going to fit on there just beautifully. You're probably looking at this like there's a problem here, because I don't want to have these line boards and these dados on the outside of my project. So SketchUp has this option called flip. So if I right click, I'll hit escape so you can see what I did again. So if I right click on this component, it'll say flip along. Now I always get confused with this, so I usually just start with red, and if it's not right, I just undo it and try another one. So if I hit flip along components red, you'll notice now that it flips that. It flips it around, so now it's a mirrored copy. It still is a component just like this. So what's kind of fun here is, let's say I make a mistake. Now please don't do this. I just want to give this to you as an example. Let's say I want to make the cabinet deeper. If I ever want to edit a component, I've got to double click on it until I get this box around it. So if I want to grab the push-pull tool now, I get the red X. I can't do anything because this thing's been made a component. So if I want to make something a component, I have to double click on it. And when I get this bounding box around it, now I can draw on it, or I can edit it. So let's say I wanted to make this side longer. My cabinet now needs to be 15 inches deep. You'll see whatever I do to this one, it automatically happens on the other side. Now I don't want to do that, so I'm going to hit the undo button and escape, so I'm not editing that, or I just can click elsewhere, so I'm not editing that component any longer. But sometimes we'll want to edit a component and you'll forget, oh shoot, I've got to go ahead and double click it so it's active to edit. So this is a component. You can tell if something's a component if you click on it one time and the entire component is selected. Now let's draw our bottom shelf in here. Now if I look here, I can get this list up of my bottom shelf dimensions. My bottom shelf is 10 1/4 by 14 inches. Now instead of having to draw that, if you are following along with me, you'll see here I can just do this. I can start a rectangle, and I'm going to have to zoom right in here, but this is going to start in this corner and it's going to go over to here. Whoops. So I accidentally drew that rectangle flat, so I just hit Control Z or undo, and I'm going to try that again. I'm going to go here. I just clicked a little too early. Oh, you notice this. Do you see how it's drawing the center of the rectangle? If I hit Control, that will change. So let me back out and show you what's happening here. So there's lots of different ways SketchUp can draw. The way that I prefer it is if I pick a point, I draw, and then I pull it out diagonally and it makes it bigger. But if I hit Control, I can also, it'll mirror it. Whatever I do on the right side, it does on the left side. So the piece grows twice as fast. So if it ever starts drawing in a way that you don't want, try hitting Control, and that will modify the rectangle command. So I got it the way that I want it now. I'm going to click here. I'm going to click down here. Now it looks like nothing happened. However, what I just did was I drew a rectangle on top of that component. If I hadn't made this side a component, it's going to fuse this together. But since this is a component, you'll notice when I pull this out, see, if I try to pull out the component, I get the red arrow. But I just laid a rectangle on top of that component, so I can pull this out, and I'm going to snap it all the way into the other dado on the other side. So now I can see that my bottom shelf is going to fit this cabinet just fine. My bottom shelf is exactly the right size, and if we want to double check it, we certainly can. I come over here, click on the tape measure, and I'm going to grab the dimension tool, and I can start on this end and go all the way to this end. And I see that I'm at 1 foot 2 inches, which translates to 12 plus 2, 14 inches. So I know that my stuff is exactly the right width because I know that I am 15 inches apart, and I can double check that here as well. 1 foot 3 inches, that's 15 inches. I'm going to get rid of these dimension lines just because sometimes they get in the way. Now, one thing, I don't know why this says endpoint origin in K-side. There's some sort of glitch in SketchUp that's showing that, so there's no reason why it is there, but it is. Now, one thing I've got to do is this bottom shelf is not a component yet. And if I don't make it a component, when I put my back on, it's going to fuse my back and my bottom shelf together, and I'm going to have issues. So I'm going to double click on this. Sometimes you have to triple click. I want to make sure all the surfaces are blue. You can orbit around to double check it. And then I right click on it and say make a component. And I'm going to call this bottom shelf. important you call it bottom shelf because you're going to have an adjustable shelf in here before we're all done. And I hit OK. Now I've got my sides and my bottom shelf. You can see when I click one time on them, they all turn blue. That's a step that if you miss is going to be extremely frustrating, because if you forget to make something a component and you draw another piece on it, you're going to have to redo it. There's no way to fix that. Let's go up to the top now. On the top of our cabinet, we don't need to have a whole shelf because this is going to get hidden by the face frame. So all we need up here is a couple pieces of wood that run across that we can screw our top to. So we're going to call those stringers, and if I go here, I can see that my stringers are 2 inches by 14 inches. So I could just draw a 2 inch by 14 inch rectangle. That's totally fine. But I'm going to draw them in place. I like drawing things in place because it lets me know that everything is going to work. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did before with the dado, but I'm going to make the pieces a little bit smaller. So I'm going to grab my tape measure, and I'm going to start from here, and I'm going to go back 2 inches. And then I'm going to draw a rectangle on top of it. And remember, I'm laying this rectangle on top of the side. It's another shape. That's why I need to make this a component. So I'm going to go here, then I'm going to grab the push-pull tool, and I'm going to pull this all the way across to the other side and snap it right in place. So my stringer is the exact same length as my bottom shelf. This gives me something to nail my face frame to when my face frame eventually gets attached to my cabinet. Now I could, if I wanted to, get my rectangle tool and draw over 2 inches to make my back stringer. Totally fine. But what I like to do is to keep things that are similar all a part of the same component group, so that if I edit one, the other one also changes. So we're going to come back here to this move tool, and I'm going to hit Control again, and I'm going to look for that plus. See that little plus down there? Now I can grab, let's see if it'll let me grab this. Oops, see daisy. I didn't make it a component yet. So if I try to move this, even if I hit the plus, it's only grabbing one part of that. So I'm going to hit Escape, and I got to double click on here, and I got to make this a component. It's really easy to forget to make things components. And I'm going to call this stringer. Say OK. Now I'm going to come back here. It doesn't matter if it's selected or not. I'm going to grab the move tool, hit the plus, and now it pulls out another one. And I want this one to stop right inside of this rabbit. Okay? So that we're setting this whole thing up so our back can go on here, and the back has something to attach to on the top, the sides, and the bottom shelf. So it's really important that we have something for the back to attach to, just like we have something for the face frame attached to it, this stringer. And eventually, after we draw our top, we're going to put screws through the stringers and into our top. I'm just going to verify that this thing did get made a component, and indeed it is, because when I click on it one time, it turns all blue. Now I've got some of these guidelines hanging around here. I'm going to get rid of them because I don't like them. So we've got the case of our cabinet. This thing's coming along pretty nicely. The last thing that we're going to put in today is our back. So to get our back put in here, we are going to, I'm going to grab the handle so I can move this. We are going to draw a 1/4 inch back, and that's a rectangle. So that back is going to start way up here in the corner. Some of you, you'll notice this right here. You'll notice that your rabbit is deeper than your dado. That's totally fine. We always have our rabbits go half the depth. So this is a 3/4 inch wide piece. So that's why we had this rabbit be 3/8. That's half of 3/4. So we're going to start our rectangle here. We're going to come all the way down to here. Now, if I let it sit there for a moment, it will snap at the same level as this. Okay? So kind of hover here, and then you can just slide right over, and it'll keep that horizontal line, because we don't want the back to stop here. We want our back to completely fill up the rabbit. Now this looks kind of funny. There's like this invisibly thin piece of wood there. We've got to pull this sucker out. So if I grab the pull tool, I'm going to pull it out, and you'll see in the bottom right corner, I'm going to pull it out 0.25 inches or 1/4 of an inch. So it doesn't quite take up the whole space of the rabbet. We've got a little bit extra there in case we've got a staple or something sticking out that we don't see it from the side. And my very next step, you guessed it, I need to make this a component. So I'm going to double click on here until everything is blue. I can see on the inside and the outside of the cabinet, this thing is blue. I'm going to make a component, and I'm going to call this back. Now this next step is completely optional. If you know that you want to have cords coming in and out of here, let's say you're going to put a monitor or something on there, or you're going to put an Xbox down here and you want to have cords come out, you can put a hole in here. And the CNC router is great at cutting holes. But remember, in order to edit a component, I got to double click, and I'm going to make a circle in here. And if you want to, you can draw guidelines to have this circle be in the exact right place. I'm going to have a radius of 1, so it's a 2-inch circle. And then I can just push this in 0.25. Oh, and you see that it went the wrong way. So if it went the wrong way, I'm just going to hit Control-Z, and I'm going to push it in 0.25, and then I'll see from the inside of my cabinet I made a hole in the back. Nice spot for cords to go through if that's something that you want to do, and if it's not, that's fine. I am not going to do that, so I'm just going to hit Control-Z a couple times to get rid of that. And now you have your case parts with your stringers, bottom and back. Everything is a component. So I'm going to save this, and we'll see you next time.